All right, this is John Reed, Ditonomica. I'm in Atlanta. I got Esteban Kolksy, baby.
Hey, I'm in Atlanta too. What are the odds of that, man?
We put some butts in seats here for this one. This is at the end of the CRM Playaz in real life event. You did the closing keynote. I did a session with Brian on AI CX fails, which was fun.
And by the way, before we go any further,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that everybody knows this event is brought to you by Brohammer Law Offices.
Brohammer, yeah. We had a satirical commercial about call us and we'll sue companies about AI failures on your behalf.
The best part of the whole thing was seeing John's smiling face while the commercials were playing.
That thing killed
the
me,
sense
man.
of pride of ownership was apparent there.
Yeah, I felt good about it, dude.
It was very good.
To be fair, Brian did most of the work on that one. We'll have to find a way to replay that online. So, I've been wanting to get with you for a while, and this event's kind of a rapid fire event, but now we have a chance to kind of dig in a little bit. I want to get into your hatred of context graphs lingo. Yeah. But before we do that, tell me about your closing keynote today. What were your goals? What did you want do you want to shake up the audience a little bit? What did you want to shake them up about?
I wanted to change the mentality about AI. I wanted to change it from, it's not a technology, but it's a paradigm shift. It's a change that impacts society and workplaces from 0 to 100 in the way that we do things. It's comparable to the personal computer being introduced in the organization, not to the internet. Because if you really think about it, without the personal computer, the internet would have never existed. Without the personal computer, data would never existed. So all these things that we keep saying that they're like, changes, they're not changes, they're just evolution. But we got to the point where we actually, what I wanted people to take away from this is like, just like in the 1980s and 1990s, we democratized, digital access by giving people computers. Now we're democratizing intelligence by putting intelligence in processes, and that changes the way it should change the way that you think about it.
Yeah, and I want to argue about a few things with you, but not so much that because I want to save that. But I think intelligence is an interesting term to argue about a little bit because I view these systems as facsimiles of intelligence and not true intelligence. But I do still understand and you and I were talking about this before we started recording. The facsimile of intelligence concept is just other people have used similar terminology, but I just like that one because I think I was listening to an AI expert the other day talk about like how there's so much arguing online about whether the system is truly intelligent or not. And he's saying it really comes down to, did it fulfill its purpose for the user? If it fulfilled the purpose for the user in the context, like for example, in the workplace, then I accept the word intelligent, I guess, in that sense, because it fulfilled the job, but it's a facsimile, right? It's a constrained version of it.
But can I not accept that premise?
But it's very brittle. Yeah. You're the one that used the word intelligence.
I do, because you have to have a conversation that is relatable to the audience. But if it wasn't to me, this, I never use intelligence. To me, it's not about intelligence. It's about machine learning to the end level.
Sure.
It's about, it's about deterministic.
But you understand my distinction though, right? Because I'm saying that if it works for you in that context, whatever you want to call it, I don't really care. I'm okay with, but you need to be aware that just because it works for you in that context most of the time, doesn't mean that it extrapolates to all these other ways, right? It just works in that one way for you.
So there's one thing that I always like to do before we have a conversation, which is like, set a common set of like nomenclature that we can reverse, right? Yeah. To me, intelligence, if I go through all the reading I've done over the last 25 years, it comes back to like very simple things. Cognition, understanding, adoption, iteration. So like, you learn it, you understand it, you do it, and then you learn how to do it better next time. And if you take all those 4 critical characteristics of intelligence, most of what we're doing is cognition. It's not even understanding or operation or anything else. Yeah. So then we're stuck at the part where it's machine learning and cognition is not understanding.
I would also call it the identification and pursuit of an autonomous goal to perpetuate your own survival.
That's right.
Which you see plenty in the animal kingdom with animals that I think are far more sophisticated than today's AI systems. But
one of my closing statements today was like, if you do this, you're going to take the trivial work and automate it so you can actually do the real work that is intelligent.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I want to get back to that. But before, let's go through the other components of your thesis because they were interesting. The other key one is about intelligence becoming a part of infrastructure.
It is infrastructure.
So tell us about that.
Well, most people treat it as a technology. They think it's a technology that is overlapped and overlaid on top of things. But if you're going to do it right, it needs to be infrastructure. It needs to be available to anybody at any level for any activity. You cannot just say, we're going to do chatbots for customer service because that's a technology. That's not intelligence. That's just automating, bad processes and make them bad faster. That's all you're doing. If you really want to change the way you do it, you need to redesign the process of customer interaction. You need to make intelligence part of that process. You need to make things like I was saying earlier, understanding. I really need to understand what your problem is if I'm going to resolve it automatically. I cannot be a keyword matching to an existing, knowledge-based article and give you that as an answer. That's not an answer. So if you really want to do it, understanding it becomes critical, which is when it becomes intelligent. And that's what we're going to do in this. We're just taking technology that creates facsimiles of intelligence,
Right.
automated, save your own life automation.
Right.
And then that's what we're actually calling AI or artificial intelligence.
Right. And I think there's another thing that the audience kind of missed because it came towards the end, but it's really, really important. I think you and I basically agree on this one, which is there is a really big distinction to be made between an out-of-the-box large language model and something that's perhaps domain-specific, more dedicated, and has some level of, contextual engineering, if you will. In other words, and I hate that phrase, but the point being that the model's being fed by deeply relevant information that's well-governed to a particular company role.
Yeah.
The output from that is going to be vastly more relevant more of the time than anything you're going to get off the shelf.
Absolutely.
And that's a really, really big distinction because you were saying to Ron Miller during the QA, like that the LLM, you don't even care about the conventional generative AI LLM. When you're talking about embedding an infrastructure, you're talking about this much more domain-specific approach. To AI.
I'm talking about different AI models and different ways to approach different models that haven't been implemented. I mean, it's not even go from large language models or small language models or to domain specific, like you say. It's going to create your own model that could leverage LLM and Gen AI, but it could also leverage inference. You could also leverage, adversarial networks. You could leverage a lot of things that actually allow you to do that understanding.
Leveraging verifiable knowledge bases, verifiable code, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that is it's somewhat of a pseudo neurosymbolic advance because the tool calling we're talking about there would be more symbolic systems, sources of truth, if you will, sources of organizational truth, which is a modification on the pure sort of deep learning model of
but now you're going
but it's not truly neurosymbolic, but it's got a little bit of that
it's
flavor.
Not, but now you're going to a level that most people don't comprehend. When you talk about neurosymbolism, linguistics, when you talk about world models and customized models, most people are barely stuck trying to understand what ChatGPT could do for them, right?
Right. But
so then that jump is the next
we can't solve that in this conversation. But the point is the point is that you're making a big distinction. Yeah. And I think that distinction becomes very important with your next point, which was that the cost of intelligence is becoming way cheaper and we need to move past token economics. And the reason that I think the two things are connected is that I don't agree that the cost is going to get much cheaper with these huge models with vast reasoning systems that are expending so much energy at the time of inference. Where I do agree with you is smaller, more customized models.
Yes.
Now you're talking about a more affordable construct.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you were referring to.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to make a public frontier model cheaper no matter how you try it, because it has to do so much processing to understand what you're asking and deliver a value. But if you have a smaller model with that's much more constrained with guardrails and I'm sorry to say this, I know you're going to hate me, but a better grounded word model.
Oh shit! You're going to use the word grounded on me.
But I'm going to use it properly, not the way that it's being used by. But you cannot ground a public model. You can ground your own built model because you can actually create, which is what you're talking about. It's actually constraints. It's about guardrails. It's about guidelines. It's about a much more narrow focus on what you're trying to solve. And then when you do that, then your token economics become affordable.
If we have time, we might get back to that grounding thing. If we don't, check out my recent CRM Combos appearance where I spent 15 minutes deconstructing that word. So you also had some kind of upbeat messages around some of the impacts this can have if you embed this architecturally inside your organization using the principles we just talked about. You talked about more output for employee.
Yeah.
You talked about your favorite was decision velocity accelerates.
Acceleration.
Did I miss one?
No, actually, what the other one was less friction.
Less friction.
So you reduce the friction, enabling people to do whatever they want, right? You accelerate the decision velocity, so I can actually make the decisions quickly. You put everything in infrastructure, you reduce the friction, you enable me to make decisions quickly, and you allow me to deploy it quickly and see what works and what doesn't, and then iterate. That's the basic model of what AI should be delivering. If you don't go with public models, you can do that. If you go with public models, you get lost in the translation from a simple statement to a public model interpretation of your simple statement.
But there's a catch, because you also, while you have those sort of upbeat messages of what's possible, you also made a strong point around that you need to embrace a different level of AI literacy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't get that right now. And I think it's a serious problem, because executives are coming in with these fantasies of, why can't you build this for me in Claude Code this week?
Right.
Because I did this at home and it looked really cool. And I think that gap is hard for people if you don't have the AI literacy. I just interviewed a customer last week that explained to me how he was able to push back against that kind of executive brouhaha, because he understands how these models work, and he could explain, this isn't going to be a well-governed, secure, scalable solution that you fucked around with at home this week.
You're talking about 2% of people that can do that.
But you want to push people on AI literacy, though. That's the point.
I do, because I don't want them to learn how to use Claude better. I want them to understand what AI is and how to use it better. I don't care about the model. I don't care about the provider. I don't care about it itself. I want you to understand what AI really is and how you can leverage it to do a better job.
You don't just want people to know how to drive the car better. You want them to be able to get under the hood and know what makes the car run.
Change your own oil,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And then the other final sort of point you exhorted is on the value of your work. That's your true intelligence.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where, when Ron Miller challenged you, he said, look, I don't think you're obsolete, Esteban, because you had kind of made the jarring comment that the research work you've done for the last 20 years was obsolete. I thought that was a really interesting friction point in the conversation, because Ron was saying, I don't think these models can do what it is you do, Esteban. So what do you make of that dialogue?
I think that if I were to build a model, I don't have a model to build that in the way that I do it, but if I were to build that model, it could totally do what I've done. What it cannot do is it cannot intuit. You cannot imagine, you cannot innovate, you can only repeat what has been done. And this is a critical difference. It's like people, us, you, me, workers, knowledge workers, everybody around us, what we provide, if we provide that intuition, that innovation, that imagination that computers don't have. Computers do what they're told. I don't care how many white papers people publish and how many new models use the word reasoning and logic and context. And I know we'll talk about that in a moment, but that doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters is the fact that, I provide the link between what the computer can do and the outcome that I'm looking for. The computer cannot deliver that.
So you wrote a post on Constellation. Why do you hate context graphs?
Because it's reductionist. It just takes a very interesting, very complex model that we need to have as the next iteration for artificial intelligence and reduces it to a software solution so that some VC can make $1 billion. I hate that idea. I hate to take something that is valuable, that we've been discussing for 20, 30, 40 years, that we barely started to crack the surface of, and then make it. This is what happened to the metaverse. We took something that was actually necessary in the future, and we reduced it to a pantless, avatar going around the world, poking people. That's so stupid. There's something is happening with context graphs. Once you say that context can be reduced to a graph, you eliminate all the value that context provides.
Well, I'm looking for your follow-up post on agentic memory, because agentic memory is the other.
Agentic memory, there's no such a thing as agentic memory. When people say memory, all they're doing is they're remembering the last interaction, but that's not state, that's not real memory. There's no context inherent to that. There's no...
So here's what I think is really interesting, is that one of the things that off-the-shelf LLMs struggle with is a condition of statelessness.
Yeah.
And statelessness is, I hate the jargon, so sorry about that, but it's really important to have stateful context in the enterprise, right?
Absolutely.
Because especially like in the case of like even something simple like managing a sales account, right?
Yeah.
If the account rep that you're talking to changed 3 different times in different dates, if you can't track those events in a meaningful chronological way and help the language model understand that, then your entire enterprise application has gone completely down the drain.
Statelessness is what actually sunk CRM as a value story.
So let me tell you,
it could have been valuable, but then we removed state from CRM, then it became valueless.
So let me tell you what I'm interested in. You can tell me what you're interested in. I'm interested in not necessarily context graphs or any specific tool. I'm interested in rethinking how you create a state of statefulness and real-time relevance for your models. How do you do that? I don't care where you pull it from. Could be from a vector engine.
You create metadata repositories.
Could be anywhere.
Could be anywhere. Well, I mean,
right.
Let's rephrase that. It has to be under the control of the organization and part of the governance model. But having said that, it just I could store it in like an AWS partition. I can store it in premises. Doesn't matter.
What I'm really interested in, I don't know if you're thinking along the same lines. I'd like to sit down with executive teams and say, look at a specific area where decisions are difficult and data has been insufficient in the past.
Yes.
And I want to say, what data sources do you ultimately need to make a better decision? Like, let's rethink this, right? and then let's see if we can architect that in an infrastructure capacity, support your decision making, not to make decisions for you, but to provide you with the right context, if you want to call it that, for those decisions, right? Because now I think you actually have a technology that can potentially incorporate a number of different points of context into that framework for you, right? So shouldn't you just start over and say you were making decisions based on incomplete information and stale information in the past? Like, wouldn't that be where you'd want to start?
It goes back to the point that we discussed earlier about decision velocity accelerating, right?
Right.
It's like, I mean, if I give you all the information that you need and all you have to do is make a decision, which is the value that humans provide,
right?
Then I want that system.
Right.
I want the ability to take all the context, take all the metadata, take all the content, and eventually in 10, 15 years, take the intent behind that interaction, take all that stuff.
Sentiment, of course.
And determine what's the actual question and what's the one answer. That's
what I'm saying is I would like to start that conversation like in a whiteboard mentality, not like in a vendor mentality.
But
plug in Snowflake and it's going to work, or plug in. No. You know what? Do you know what I mean?
So like here's the wrinkle in that thinking. I agree with you 100%, but here's a wrinkle in that thinking. Number one, you need to executives that think beyond technology to the actual business process and the outcome that they're looking for. And that's where the vendors actually are boycotting us, because they're saying Snowflake can do it for you. That doesn't matter what it is, right? I mean, we get all the data together and we give you all the data that you need to make a decision without actually thinking where the data comes from, what it is, or how you put it together. So when you remove the vendor and the technology from the equation, having been able to have the conversation on a whiteboard, like, what do I need? Where does it come from? How do I process it? What's the decision? And what do I do with that? Those 5 steps. I've done these workshops before, and like the majority of the executives, more than 2/3 of executives cannot follow along because they don't have that understanding at that level. No. They don't have a systems understanding. They have a technology understanding.
So what's the way forward then?
It's what is happening right now, which is replacing executives with like younger, better trained systems thinking people versus being technology thinking people. We are who
it's easier to learn than unlearn, isn't it?
It always is.
Yeah.
Even for me. I mean, I'm still doing shit that I did 20 years ago because even though there's better ways, I'm like, it works,
So let's talk about grounding now for a sec, because of all the terms that grate on me, that's the one that grates on me. And I think it ties in a little bit here, because my problem with the term is that I believe someday, I don't know how soon, it could be 10 years from now, could be longer, I think we're going to have what I would consider truly grounded systems. So when you think about a grounded system, you think about it's based on some level of world model truth that you're kind of essentially born with, and then you learn on top of that truth. So you're truly grounded. It's a little bit like living beings, right? Where you're born into the world with a certain evolutionary framework, and then you build on top of that, right? And that evolutionary framework for a lot of animals, for example, includes a knowledge of physical, the
awareness,
awareness from the day they're born, they're walking, right? Like that's inherited. That's a form of true grounding in my view. Like what's happening now with large language models is essentially giving them the best context or whatever you want to call it, kind of from the side, and praying and hoping that they're going to take that context, and praying and hoping that you provide it with the right context. And it bothers me a lot because when people say grounding, they're implying that if they just sort the data problem and feed it the right data, that they have an intelligent system. And I don't agree. And so, for example,
go back to one second to where you're just talking about, because this is really critical to understand. One of the reasons I hate the concept of context graphs, because context graphs, what it does is like takes one decision, creates a graph, and says, this is the answer forever.
Right.
Instead of saying this is one of the potential things that you have to learn from to actually evolve into a better answer. So in the case of grounding, it's like saying, okay, you know how to walk, right? So that you'll never forget.
Right.
But what if you don't know how to walk? And that's what we said is grounded. Then you don't know walking. You're like, standing on 4 legs and standing still because you don't know how to walk. That's what the context graph does. It creates a lower level of grounding that you need for the model to actually be efficient.
And again, when you look at the real practitioners, and I watch these videos all the time and I geek out on the practitioners working on things like agentic memory, they're working on context engineering, they're working on semantic memory, they're working on vector DB storage of user profiles and preferences. They're trying to work in Slack channel conversations, all of that. And they all tell you, like, there's perils to this process. And if you feed the wrong stuff at the wrong time, to your point, what worked for you yesterday may not work for you today. Maybe the model changed, maybe the model drifted, maybe you drifted is more likely, right? That your priorities shifted in a way that the context isn't aware of. And so I'm not criticizing it in the sense that, like, I do agree that, as we discussed, these are much more potent and interesting and cost-efficient systems than the frontier models. So I concede that point, but calling it grounding is just completely misleading, and it implies that this is a scientific process where you put the right data in and you're going to always get a result. And I spend so much time trying to say, especially in the B2B world, that outliers are a big deal.
Yeah.
You alienate your outlier, you alienate potentially your decision maker, your budget holder.
Yes.
You're the person who can sue you.
you can apply the thinking of one situation to a different situation.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's my issue with
that.
that.
I agree. I think that, like, we're not going to go forever in bad-mouthing grounding. I think it's a bad idea. The same way that I think that context graphs is a bad idea, because the reduction is elements. They take a very complex situation and they reduce it to like a soundbite. And that's never a good idea.
Well, it's an interesting time, right? Because it appears that there's a whole lot of opportunity for companies to seize, but they have to be able to, like you said, have a more literate filter on the pros and cons of this stuff. Otherwise, you're going to end up shipping bad code like Amazon did this week.
Yeah.
And downing your own systems.
Yeah.
And
that was fun, by the way.
Yeah. And I think executives are really, really vulnerable to that right now. And the markets really aren't helping, because the markets are rewarding, as was covered earlier today, rewarding companies like Block for supposedly making these brilliant AI transitions, when in fact, it's someone that overhired during the pandemic and got caught up in Bitcoin blockchain schemes.
See, here's an interesting thing, what you just mentioned, the Amazon situation, right? A company like Amazon potentially and easily can recover from that.
Yeah.
A mid-sized company that depends on every transaction, you do it once wrong, and that's it. That's the end of the fucking company.
Right. And that's the one thing that I wonder about I really like the vision that you laid out for companies taking responsibility for owning their own operational infrastructure. I wonder how many smaller companies have the resources and ability to do that effectively right now.
Not many.
And
I
think a lot of those companies, in my opinion, when they're smaller, are better off standardizing on a preferred platform provider, like throw out a Zoho, for example, that's going to pay a lot of attention to your security and platform issues.
And that's what's happening. So the Zohos, the Oracles, the Salesforce, the SAPs, the HubSpots of the world become the platform of choice. But then that takes away your independence of thought. Right. Condemning you to these very small setups.
I think where I do meet you halfway on that point, though, is that if I'm a CIO of a company like that, even if I choose to standardize on a particular vendor's platform at this point in time, I still need to take responsibility for my overall data platform strategy going forward. Yeah. And not you. It's too important to offload that on any one
growing
vendor.
Beyond that standard platform to create your own private platform with your components that are built on top of that in an ecosystem. That's a strategy that
it's
works.
kind of a parallel track, right? Because there's platform providers that can give you some trusted, governed ways of working now, but you also need to be building your own quote unquote stack as well.
That's the whole idea of actually democratizing intelligence, which is the key part of my speech. It's like, democratizing intelligence means like intelligence is accessible and available to everybody with the proper governance, but it's available to anybody. And it may come from a established provider, or may come from something that I built, or may come from a smaller vendor and all this combined into into a private platform that governs everything from one central location. That's the value of AI.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because when you look at concepts like data sovereignty and then the concept of like AI sovereignty, which is, one of the really interesting points that I thought was made during the Zoho event you and I were at was when Raju said, if you become intelligence dependent on a particular provider, what happens when that provider cuts off your intelligence?
Yeah.
Then you're really dumb.
Which has happened before, even without intelligence, but it's happened before during the internet. For example, we had providers that actually cut off access to the databases because they wanted more database licenses. So then now you're actually increasing your cost to do the same thing that you were doing before, or you're prohibited out of establish a new way of working. This is why you shouldn't be locked into a specific vendor, but build your own way to manage that vendor as a provider, not as a dependent on that vendor.
And the promise of more diffused, smaller models and more like tightly controlled and constrained architectures is they are more affordable. And so it may help you to decentralize this technology. But to your point, I think of your talk, if you're not wary of lock-in, if you put all your trust in these providers, then you are in a dependent relationship. And however much you might like a particular company and think they have your best interests at heart,
they don't.
Shock.
I know.
All right. Anything else?
No, I wish I had pros to grasp for that one,
Thanks for hashing it out. That was fun.
Thank you.
Later.